welcome back. Today we are here with Dr. Bianca. How are you doing today?
Good. We're doing well. Doing
Awesome.
well.
It's so good to have you here. Um, I would love for you to first tell us how you got your start in medicine, where you went to undergrad, grad school, if you went to grad school, med school, and where you're doing your residency right now.
Yeah. So I always this is like my little personal statement story. But knew I wanted to do something in like the healthcare realm since I was like 8. Both of my parents were in healthcare, and it was really great seeing how much they love their jobs, and that their jobs were just really committed to helping and serving people. And I looked up to both of them, and so in my mind, I was like, I want to be just like these people. My dad was a doctor, and so in my mind, I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna be just like him. So in second grade, for like, what do you want to be when you grow up day, I put on my like mom's like white lab coat, had my little clipboard, and like that was my plan for my life. But obviously, throughout like high school, college, my reasons for wanting to go into medicine became a lot more like solidified, not just this like cute 8-year-old's dream, but a lot more tied into where I felt called to like serve people, and how I felt called to really like help people in this world. So high school, I was really like your typical science nerd. It's like I love biology. Was doing well in those classes and love thinking about the way that the human body works. And I was that person who was like, wow, look at this cool new thing I learned today about the human body. And so definitely knew I wanted to do something in the field of science, still keeping that idea of medicine in the back of my mind. I went to undergrad at Harvard, and didn't mention I'm from New Jersey originally, but my family's from Cameroon. Yeah. So I went to undergrad at Harvard, and went in like pre med, and ultimately chose to concentrate in neurobiology. Just because like the brain was like very fascinating to me. No idea why, but as a freshman, I was like, this sounds great. And so studied neurobiology, did the pre med thing, and it was really not necessarily my pre med science classes that I think solidified my desire to ultimately go to med school, but it was all of the things that I did outside of my required classes, the different things that I got to do in the community, particularly working with kids and with teens. So I did a lot of like teaching, and I was teaching health education in inner city schools in Boston. And then I was doing some like dance and creative expression like teaching to elementary school kids in Cambridge. And so just having the opportunity to like be in the community and like work with young people made me realize that I actually wanted to do something in the realm of like pediatrics. Like I wanted to serve young people, and wanted to think about the various things that contribute like to the health of a young person. And so it was cool getting to address, people's health in a different way than medicine as a college student, right? I was like teaching health education, which is such a huge part of like health outcomes, and then like just doing the confidence building, creative expression classes with the elementary school students, like that stuff, whether you really think about it, indirectly does impact like health outcomes, right? Just feeling like empowered and feeling confident to take control of things in your life, including your health. And so for me, I was like, all right, cool. Like I love working with kids, and I love thinking about how to make kids healthy. And so, going into med school, I was like, I definitely want to do something where I'm thinking about the health of children and directly impacting that with my work. And so I applied to med school. Not right away. I took a year out. I'm all about the year out, all about the pause for like reflection and wellness, because it's a long journey. So I took a year out and worked as a teacher in France, and then I applied to med school while I was abroad, and ultimately came back and started in 2016 at Penn.
Wow, I love that you said you value the year, the gap in between.
All about it.
Yeah, sometimes you need a break, especially because the path is so long in this
Mhm.
field. Did you do anything else during your break besides teaching in France?
Yeah, I I really prioritized like that experience. I was abroad for 7 months, and lived in the south of France, and I really wanted to do something like very immersive. Like I'd been taking French since I was 9, and took it all through college, and got fluent. And so I wanted the chance to be able to like actually take my French to the next level. I love different cultures, and even thinking about my career in medicine, hope to do global health. But back then I didn't really know that, but I just had this desire to kind of like go abroad and immerse myself in a different cultural context. And then I just like I wanted to eat great food.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's it.
yeah. And it was like the perfect job because I had realized throughout college that I really love working with kids. And so this was great. Like I was a English teacher, teaching kids from like, preschool age all the way up to like fifth grade. And so it was just a perfect experience. And actually before I went to France, I had like a couple months in the summer. And so I was a camp counselor, which was like really nice. I was at home with my mom and my sister and was like a camp counselor, just locally in our town. So got to do the typical summer things like go to the movies and like go to the pool with the kids, go to Six Flags, and it was really nice to just like decompress and do something just like so relaxing and ultimately kind of tangentially related to what I want to do long term, right? Like working with kids, but also just like really fun.
Yeah, I love that for you. And one thing that you said, even in our pre-conversations, was about how a lot of things that you did in your life, coming to this field of being a pediatrician, were in line with your purpose. So you working with children consistently, even outside of work, just having fun with them, was in line with what you were going to do eventually as a pediatrician. And that brings me to the point of like purpose and a job. So, as a woman of faith, which is one thing I really admire about you, and I love how it trickles down into every part of your life. I really admire that. Sometimes there's a confusion between how much impact a job should have on your purpose. You work with children in different aspects, but now you're working with children as a pediatrician.
Mhm.
How do you define, like, how do you differentiate between your purpose and a job?
That's a good question, and I think at different points in this journey, you might lose that distinction, right? Like, especially because the journey in medicine is one that is like so consuming in terms of time. Like everything you're doing as a pre med, taking all those classes, all those labs, all that orgo, right? Like you're just spending so much time, and then studying for the MCAT and thinking about like getting experiences outside of your coursework, and then when you get to medical school and it's just like so much time, and so it's very easy, right, for your like job and this career journey to feel like everything, to feel like it is the entirety of who you are, and if you mess up along the way, you have like failed as a human. Right, it's like very easy to feel that. And so it was so important for me just even realizing that and talking to people who like are now my wonderful mentors. Like I was like very proactive, right? Like coming into medical school, I got plugged into a church right away because I knew that I couldn't just like only be in medical school. Like I needed community and I needed people who I could connect with, not just as like a developing physician, but as a like daughter in Christ, as a sister in Christ, right? And people who were, some of whom were in medicine, but a lot of whom aren't, right? So they can continue to help me see that purpose, or see that aspect of my purpose that's like not necessarily related to medicine, right? Because that's what's so awesome about having friends of faith. They can call out aspects of your purpose that, yeah, might be related to your job, but also are just things that are very apparent in how God has made you, that like are active in your job but that are independent of your job, right? Like even if I wasn't doing medicine, even if I were to lose all of that, like these aspects of myself that are I think related to the purpose that God has for me on this earth are still very much present. And so I can list out what some of those things are, those things that I've realized along the way. So I think a big part of my purpose is to address inequities in different spaces, right? And so I happen to do that in the realm of healthcare. But in theory, that's something I could do anywhere, right? And so that's something that I really love doing, right? Like Philadelphia is a great place to think about that because there are just so many disparities in health and just so many unfortunate injustices in housing and in the school system, right? Where you're seeing folks in different zip codes having very different lived experiences. And so I'm someone who like cares about those things and sees them and is just upset by them and has a desire to change them. And so I do that through a platform of health. Another thing that I've really come to see is like my purpose is just like uplifting people. And so medicine is like just really hard, and it can be really hard to see the people around you just like struggling along the journey. And it's not necessarily even struggling like academically or anything like that. Like it takes a toll on you emotionally, mentally, right? It's like such a rewarding journey. But the amount that you're dedicating to it can be really hard, right? And that's why I advocate for therapy for everyone, including like, medical providers. Um, but I love being that person who can like see someone, see that they're having a hard time, and just give them a word of encouragement, right? To be like, hey, I just want you to know that like I've noticed that you're doing a really good job, and here are the specific things that I've noticed. I don't know if anyone has like told you that recently. Or hey, it seems like you're like having a really hard time. Like, what can I do to help? Or even just like sitting and listening, right? Someone might start venting to you and you just kind of sit there and you just listen. And you're like, I definitely have problems of my own, but like right now the space is for you, and I have a space in my faith community with my husband, with other folks, where I can unload those burdens that I have, so that way then when I come to my workspace, for example, when I come to an encounter with my patients, I can really just listen and just give them what they need to, I think, really unload, right? And so that's something that is great in healthcare, right? Because like a lot of our patients are going through a lot. So I can be that person who can listen, but then also with my coworkers, and even with my friends at church, right? Even with my husband Billy at home, like I can be that person who just like listens, even though I can also talk a lot. um, and so these are aspects of my purpose that I'm seeing God really use intentionally in medicine. But it's so cool to see that like they really exist outside of medicine and can be used in just so many different spheres. So.
Yeah, you are a full human being. I think
Hmm.
sometimes we get so consumed in working towards the goal of becoming an MD, a DO, a P, or whatever it is, that we think that's, we almost identify with that. And that's something I actually struggled with late last year. I decided to take like another break from studying for the MCAT because I had taken it before and I was just really like distraught. And so when I took a break to think about if this is something I really wanted to do, I felt like I'd almost given up on my purpose. I felt like, oh my God, like if I'm not going to medical school, like what am I doing? I've never thought about anything else. What am I without it? And for a second, it made me, I think that isolation was a time for me to think about who I am outside of this path, who I am, like everything else that God has blessed me with, and who I am, like the traits that I possess that I will use in medicine, but I have regardless of me pursuing that path. So I love that you said those wonderful things. Um, and I wanted to then move on to another thing you mentioned about sometimes the road can be so challenging and so tasking, but it is very rewarding. So you talk about advocating for therapy for everyone. You talk about a community and a network that you've built, mentors. Is there anything else that you can share that you use to deal with the sacrifice and the journey that is medicine so far?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think, like I said, people have really been just like so important, and like um I think thinking about the different people in your life and the different roles that they play. So like mentors are super important, and having different types of mentors. So I have my wonderful career mentors in the different areas like global health and health disparities, right, who help me and kind of support me from a career standpoint. But then I have those wonderful life mentors, some of whom are in my church, who I can go to from like, hey, like I just really had a hard rotation in the ICU, and I think I'm feeling just like kind of crushed in my soul. Like it was just really challenging. We saw a lot of patients, do well, but we also saw a lot of patients pass away, and so like I just need someone to talk to about that. And so it's great having like those mentors who know you like really deeply personally, as well as those career mentors. And then having those folks in your like faith community who can remind you of your identity outside of medicine, right? Those people who like, yeah, they can ask me how work is and I can tell them how things are going, but then we can just like talk about music and just like talk about food and talk about like hilarious things in pop culture. And those moments, I just cherish them like so much, to just be reminded that like, okay, like not everything about who I am rides on how I do in this clinical rotation, or how I do like out at work. And then God, honestly, like that's really like the number one, right? Those moments where everyone you know might be busy, people are having, their own situations, their own things going on in their life, like realizing that you are actually like never alone, like never abandoned, never doing this life and this journey in medicine on your own, but that like God has specifically opened doors and made a path for you in medicine, and he's not just going to drop you there to try to figure it out all on your own. And so like I just talk to God, and I need to talk to him a lot more, because like I sometimes I'm just like in the moment I'm like just struggling through something, just trying to figure it out on my own. And now I'm working on just like going to God more quickly, just like praying like immediately. I'm like, wow, a patient just passed away. That was really hard. Like I just need to pray. I just need to talk to God right now, and just release what I'm feeling, to a God who's like bigger than the situation that I'm currently experiencing. And so knowing that like God is always there, that he loves me, that he actually cares about everything from like my little tiny minute problems to the bigger challenges that I might be experiencing is like giving me more comfort than anything on this earth ever could.
Yeah, honestly, God is good. Honestly, and I love that you said that. That's definitely something I can relate to as well. With my phase right now, I'm very much behind you in the journey, but studying sometimes can get really frustrating for the MCAT. So just talking to God in those moments of vulnerability goes a long way. I definitely agree. Now, channeling back to a community and a network that you've built, you recently got married.
Years ago. Mhm.
Okay, yes. And I think another question that I would like to ask is about dating and navigating relationships, especially with someone that's not in medicine. How you're able to manage that and make time for that and build it into something that's beautiful and is a beautiful marriage. No.
Yeah. Um, I started dating my husband during like second year of med school, which is when we do clinical rotations at Penn. And what a time to start dating someone. I actually started dating him like a couple months before, and we had, been at church together, had some mutual friends, had crossed paths, and ultimately decided to start dating. The timing like was not ideal if I was like, really to stick to my plan of like when is the perfect time for everything to happen. But I love how God has his own plans, and you just kind of like you roll with it, right? So my first clinical rotation was one a little bit, lighter, emergency medicine. So I wasn't in the hospital like all day, every day. And so we had a little bit of time to kind of still date and get to know one another. But I had to be very transparent with him up front. I told him, I'm like, hey, this is what the year is going to look like. Here are some of the blocks that are going to be really challenging where we may not see each other as much. But let's prioritize at least, having like one or two like date nights a week, right? And so it required planning. And luckily I'm a planner, and I like to like prepare as much as I can. But at the same time, there were some things that we couldn't prepare for, right? Like when I started studying for step one, um, that was really tough. I like would spend all day studying, and then I'd be tired at the end of the day. And so we wouldn't see each other as much, right? But at the same time, he was someone who added so much to my life throughout medical school, especially like the fact that he wasn't in it, but like he just, it's like his minister mode, right? Like he had a desire to just like love me and encourage me and support me through it. Like I always say that my journey through clinical step one and then the rest of med school would not have been the same without him. Like he really helped me. Yeah, he really helped me like grow in my faith through all of that, and actually really just like keep a perspective of, job versus purpose, right? Like what you're talking about. And so as you're dating, asking yourself, like, is this person, one, are they kind of flexible and willing to go along with this crazy journey in medicine? Like, it's not going to be your typical dating experience, right? But two, are they like adding to your life? Are you adding to each other's life? Because it's a challenging journey, right? And so you don't want to add things that are going to make your life harder. So
You don't need more
you don't need
problems.
more problems, right? And he's just bringing solutions, like beautiful solutions. And so that's kind of how I knew. I was like, all right, this is like a relationship that's going somewhere.
I love that. And I love that he added and he supported you. I love that so much. So then channeling back to channeling back again to balancing things, balancing relationships in your support system. We've talked about that. Let's talk about things that you enjoy doing outside of medicine and things that you're looking forward to going from this phase in residency. What are some things you're excited to do post residency? I know the journey has been long. And you're like you've killed it every step of the way. So what are some things that you're excited to do in the future?
Yeah. So I'm a second year now, have one more year. I definitely see myself applying to fellowship and doing a fellowship in emergency medicine and in pediatrics. All the fellowships are, the majority of them are 3 years. So again, advocate for taking a pause if that's something that you need. I think sometimes people just, feel like they have to continue just straight through on this journey. And if that's what is like for you, then please do that. But also don't feel like that needs to be what you do. And so I plan on taking at least 1 or 2 years to do global health. And that's another thing that Billy and I, my husband Billy, realized that we had in common early on, was that we had a desire to kind of go to the nations and serve in places that are like really in need of service and partner with people on the ground to do work that is like sustainable, that will continue after we leave. And so he and I are planning on going somewhere in Africa. We're still narrowing down exactly where, and there are lots of different global health fellowships that people can apply to for folks who are interested in that. And we are gonna do that for at least a year. And I'm so excited. We're planning on starting a family, and so like having a kid is gonna overlap with that, which again sounds crazy, right? Like having a small child in a new country, but we have like just so much faith and like a clear vision from God in terms of what the next step looks like. And so though it's going to be unconventional and come with its challenges, we are very much like, we just got a lot of peace about it. We're very excited about it. And I've talked to so many people who've done it in different ways. And that's the cool thing, right? Like collecting data and talking to people who've done it before you is just so encouraging and inspiring. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this global health life because we want it to actually be a part of our life long term. And he wants to obviously do the ministry side of things and partner with churches abroad and even help build up churches. So that's
I'm so excited for that too. I'm excited for that too. That sounds like so. That sounds so beautiful, and I pray that you get all that and more. What? That's amazing. That's amazing. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, my last question is: let us channel this back to the future generations, to the people coming after you, future residents who may watch this later this year, future medical students, people who are considering going to the pre-med field. What is a piece of advice or a word of encouragement you'd like to share with them?
um I always like to tell people that like your journey doesn't have to be perfect in order to, be meaningful and ultimately be where you're called, right? I think sometimes people will doubt their calling in medicine and doubt the journey when things get hard, when, MCAT scores don't go the way they want, when step one scores don't go the way they want, right? When they're having difficulty in a particular like clerkship rotation, right? And I always like to be transparent that like I had my difficulties, right? Like I had my clerkship rotations where I didn't do great on our shelf exam, and that's like the exam you take afterwards. I didn't do well, and I had to take it again, right? Like it's okay for your journey to like not be perfect and to not be easy. But I think it's just so important to kind of just like be persistent and to give yourself grace for when those things aren't going perfectly, when they aren't going exactly as you would have planned from the outset. And make sure you like talk to other people who can remind you of that, right? We often stay in this like medical bubble, which can sometimes be this like psychological echo chamber where everyone expects each other to be perfect and we all put on this face of like we're doing great and everything's great when I think everyone is struggling in their own ways. And so just like be transparent with the people in your life who you can really trust, like, hey, I'm having a really hard time with this rotation right now, like what can I do? Like I feel like things are falling apart, like what can I do, right? Find those people who can speak truth, who can encourage you, right? Find those mentors and let those people remind you that the challenges don't negate the calling,
Mhm.
and continue to evaluate the calling, right? Like I always ask people, think about like my sister is going through this process now, similarly to you, studying for the MCAT. And she took a couple years off to really think, like, is medicine really for her? And I'm so glad she took that time because now she's in it with that clarity of like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. But not everyone enters the journey having taken that time. And so even as you're going along, right, like studying for the MCAT and then starting med school, continue to think like, is this exactly what I meant to do, right? I think it is okay, even if you're in it, to realize, like, actually, I've been on this treadmill, I've been on this journey, and it's actually not for me. It's actually not what I meant to do, right? You need to be honest with yourself because it's a long process and it's the rest of your life, right? And I know some people who've gone through and they're like, I shouldn't have done it. And so be honest whether or not it's your calling. And if it is, then be persistent and have grace for yourself for those parts that are going to be hard.
Oh, wonderful. Bravo, bravo, bravo. I love the thing. The one like line that's ringing in my head is the challenge doesn't negate the calling. The challenge. I love that so much. I need to put that on my wall or something. That that is so true. The challenge does not negate the calling. Wow. Thank you so much, Bianca. You have dropped so many gems. You have so shared so many wonderful, wonderful pieces of information. I'm so thankful that you came to spend this time with me today. We're rooting for you. All the members of this podcast are rooting for you. Listeners as well, I'm sure, are rooting for you. And I hope people are inspired, encouraged by your story and by the wonderful gems you dropped today. Thank you so much,
Of
Bianca.
course. It was fun being here. Thanks for inviting me.